We've all probably heard by now about the importance of participating in the upcoming 2020 census. But is the importance of the census exaggerated? Find out on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Every 10 years, the U.S. conducts a national census designed to count every person living in our country. The census is required by the U.S. Constitution, and the first census occurred in 1790. Since its inception, the U.S. Census has generated controversy. But this year, lawsuits involving the 2020 census were taken as far as the U.S. Supreme Court. On this show, my guests and I will discuss just how important the census is and what it means to each of us. Seated to my far left is Megan Gosh. In January 2017, she was hired by San Mateo County to assist the Office of Community Affairs in its effort to review, correct, and update the master address file used by the Census Bureau to mail out the 2020 census surveys. With that job done, she now works with the county to help analyze demographic data to identify outreach opportunities and to develop technical strategies to enable all residents to fill out their census surveys. Seated beside me is Aparna Ramakrishnan, who joined the San Mateo County Census team in September 2018. She focuses on strategy, communications, and capacity building for community outreach. Prior to her current work, she spent 20 years of developing and managing programs to improve health and well-being in diverse communities around the world. Seated to my right is Melissa Vergara, who recently joined the San Mateo County of Community Affairs after completing her master's in public administration. She is the office's newest community outreach specialist. Emma Gonzalez is a lifelong San Mateo County resident who now works as the manager of the San Mateo County Office of Community Affairs and is the census manager for the San Mateo County Manager's Office. Well, thank you, the four of you, for being here with me. It's a pleasure to have you. So is the census overhyped? Is its importance exaggerated?
No.
I would say absolutely not. No.
Why?
Well, there's a lot at stake with the census. So much of our federal funding comes from census data. So if people aren't counted, that data can become skewed, so that will really affect the next 10 years. So everything from social services, healthcare services, transportation will be affected, education, all of those things, we get funding, and that's based off census data. So it's really, really important that we get the message out that it's very important to take the census and participate.
So if having the census is as clear-cut as Melissa just now said, what has the controversy been about?
Well, I think there are a number of things going on this time around. We are in a political climate that has just caused anxiety and fear among many residents in San Mateo County and across the country, especially those that are people of color, immigrants, folks that feel that they can't trust the government enough to offer information and to be counted.
I'm wondering, has that fear always been there? You talk about in this political climate. So, what is the fear based on?
Well, the fear is based on, we have, as we talked about the political climate, one of the things in our office that we also support and do is immigrant services. So on one hand, I'm giving out 20,000 red cards saying, what are your rights, and acknowledging and sharing, what are individual rights. So should somebody come knocking at the door, give them information so that they're well prepared.
So somebody might come knocking at their door?
No, I'm saying if immigration were to come at their door.
Oh, okay.
So we also notify our community members of what their rights are. So on one hand, I'm letting residents know what their rights are. On the other hand, I'm also acknowledging to say, hey, but Census is going to come, and they may be enumerators knocking at your door, and how critical it is to get the information out there. I think our message today is really to empower residents to complete the questionnaire in advance.
So given the level of fear, I wonder if just telling people you have rights and the census enumerators are going to come knocking at your door, is that enough to help them overcome their fears?
Well, there's several
Because they're
different ways.
giving information, and they're giving personal information, and they don't know where that information's going to wind up.
Absolutely, and there's many safeguards within the process of the Census Bureau. They are taking security very, very seriously, and the data protections they have in place. And enumerators will only come to doors if you do not fill out your survey in advance. So there's 4 opportunities to fill out your survey, and a few more postcards you'll receive, and it's after 6 tries that then they will come to your door. So there's a lot of opportunity to stop that from
So
happening.
how do we know? Right now it comes down to an issue of trusting government. And Megan, you just said that there are lots of safeguards. How do you convince people that there are safeguards, and how do we know that there are safeguards, even when government institutions can get hacked?
That is true. The government has used the top-of-the-line consultants to develop software so they will not be hacked. They also, the Census Bureau employees all take an oath, a lifetime oath, to protect that data, and they take it very seriously. It's Title 13. They cannot share census data with any other department within the government as well.
Now, the Immigration and Naturalization Department, ICE, is asking for that information. And I'm sure if the president issues an executive order asking for the collaboration between the Census Department and immigration authorities, there's going to be a lot of pressure to share that information.
Well, the way the current law is, it's incredibly strong, and it actually prevents the sharing of information, whether it's with ICE, welfare, any local enforcement agencies. So they are very strong protections. That doesn't mean there couldn't be a situation. But I think the other thing to keep in mind is that the information being requested is very basic information. It's just 10 questions that ask about the household, how many people live there, their name, sex, race, ethnicity, and age. This is all information we provide regularly to many entities, whether government or not. And so I think it's also important for folks to understand that the risk in providing such basic information is greatly outweighed by the benefits of participating in the census because of the funding that Melissa mentioned, but also because it's representation, it's voice, right? The count determines who we can elect and who represents us here in California and Sacramento, as well as in DC. So it's very important.
So what about that citizenship question that certainly aroused a lot of fears and went all the way to the Supreme Court? Is it final? I know President Trump wanted to delay the census, or Wilbur Ross asked to delay the census. Is that question off of the census? Definitely?
Yes, we're happy to report that it is off. But it doesn't take away from the fear. To some extent, the damage is done. But really, from our perspective, it's about completing the census, the questionnaire in advance, and the self-response rate. But we are happy and pleased that California's which is the hardest state to be counted, that the citizenship question is not going to be on there, but we do have to educate our community the importance of that everybody complete it, citizens and non-citizens alike.
Now, Emma, you talked about an advance survey that was sent out. was there a survey that was like a trial survey or advanced survey?
That's
and
correct.
that did have the citizenship question on it?
It did. It went to approximately 500,000 Americans.
Now, isn't that very confusing for people? So will that be counted? Would that be taken?
No, no, that is just a trial, and it will not be counted as towards the official survey.
Did everybody know it was a trial?
They probably did not. It was very confusing.
Do we know of that 500,000, perhaps how many were returned?
No, they haven't published that information yet.
Oh, so whose idea was that, and why was that done?
That's a great question, and I think it did come from the Census Bureau. They were the decision makers behind it, but our role is to really inform our community, as we did through social media, through our networks, through working with our community-based organizations, and really everybody, to educate and say, hey, there is this questionnaire, but that is not the real questionnaire. The real questionnaire won't go out until March 12th of next year, till 2020 right now. And so I think through the media, social media outlets, and all media outlets, is really educating our community that that was a test questionnaire, so to speak. And despite the citizenship question being on there, it will not be on there come April 2020.
No, I think there are some different things about this particular census. I was going to say an online. So a lot of people, particularly a lot of households in what are low-income communities, don't have computers, or they're not online. So how does that help, having an online survey, help the Census Bureau get an accurate count?
Well, I think that decision was probably made for cost reasons. It's very expensive to print out paper copies. About 88% of our county will receive a postcard to then go online and fill out your survey. And we know that there are areas that do not have broadband subscriptions or do not have internet access, and we have mapped those locations. And so we will have assistance centers throughout the county to help individuals with their surveys.
And they're expected to walk in?
They'll be at places where they usually go. They'll be with core service agencies, they'll be at libraries. We want to make it easy for people to fill out.
Now, if people are reluctant to fill out the surveys anyway, is it expected that when they go to these particular places, they'll just on their own voluntarily go up and fill out the census to give information?
Well, we're really hoping that the people we're collaborating with are really trusted messengers in the community. So it's different when it's one-on-one, when you maybe go to a faith-based organization or the Boys and Girls Club or maybe a local charity, someone that you know and you trust, and they're there to guide you and kind of help you through that process. So we're really also relying on lots of different community-based organizations to help us get the word out and kind of promote and let people know the benefits of the census.
No, there are some communities that are said to be at high risk, that are vulnerable in terms of not being counted. So could you say what communities those are and what efforts are being put forth to engage people?
Absolutely. So the Census Bureau is based on demographic information, which communities may be at risk. And so we called those hard to count or least likely to respond. And so we've taken that information and mapped it for San Mateo County, and we know where those areas are located. We are deploying outreach teams to those areas specifically based on each demographic. So whether it's an ethnicity or a language, we'll have people to work with individuals to help explain the census, educate and motivate our residents to fill out the surveys.
So give us an example of some of those
Absolutely.
communities.
So like you mentioned, the lack of broadband subscription. We have crowded housing, renters, people that have recently moved to the county, children under 5, or is a very large group that is often undercounted, people that do not speak English. There's 14 metrics that we include in our analysis.
And there are a variety of different languages in which the census is going to be conducted in?
Yes, and there is. In San Mateo County alone, I would like to say that there's over 100 different languages that are spoken in our county. And the online version will have 12 languages, and the paper version will only have English and Spanish. But they'll have guides up to, I believe, it's over 50 different languages that will be available through a tutorial guide to help and guide those.
So if there are over 100 languages that are spoken, all of the people speaking those languages will not necessarily have access to the language that they're speaking.
Well, there are over 100 languages spoken in the county, but in terms of the families that require assistance for English, in terms of their comfort level in speaking and reading English is not necessarily all 100. So a lot of people who speak other languages at home may also speak English. So what we do is look at our demographics and look at the different languages that are spoken that also have needs in terms of language support, and try to kind of combine those two and look to what we need to provide to help them.
Sure. Now, we have some promotional materials that the Census Bureau is using, that the County of San Mateo is using, and we can begin to pull that up. And while we're waiting for it, how much money or how talk about the resources that the county is putting into its efforts to engage everybody in the community?
So that's a great question. In 2010, just to put it in perspective, in 2010, the California state put $3 million to census efforts. Here we are, 2020, and the state has now allocated over $150 million.
Where is all of that money coming from?
It's going to, it's from the governor. The governor has federal from the state.
California.
California. And San Mateo County has, on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, has allocated $3 million to go to San Mateo County census efforts. Now, in 2010, $3 million covered the entire state of California.
So do you know how much money that is in comparison to other counties in the state?
Well, the funding that we received from the state was, a lot smaller than we would have hoped. But however, the county, allocated direct county funds to put towards this effort, because we believe it to be the best return on our investment for our community residents.
Sure. Now, we had a slide just now that we can see again that said Census 2020. Is there anything to be said about that? Or it's just one of the promotional materials that's being used?
It's a promotional material. It's a logo that we developed to show our San Mateo County census efforts. So it's very distinct from the county's logo. We wanted to ensure that folks knew that we were working very closely together for our county and promoting the census. So it's different from the state's logo. We really wanted to brand our work, and so when people see all of our materials, they know where it's coming.
So those different figures in color, are they supposed to represent what, different communities, different ethnic groups?
Absolutely.
Okay. And we can, were you going to say something?
You know, it's about inclusiveness. Really, it represents all of us, regardless of our, color, regardless of our ethnicity, our language, our preferred language. It really is opening the door. We would like to celebrate the diversity in our county, and this is a representation of our wealth of diversity that San Mateo County has.
Okay, and the next slide, while you talk, Melissa.
Well, personally for me, as an immigrant, I see taking the census as more than just a form. It's more of a statement that I'm taking part in this kind of democracy, and to let people know and let our representatives know that I'm here, I'm a valuable part of this community, and I also deserve to be counted as an immigrant, and I deserve to be represented politically, but also represented in services and have access to those services. So I think that's really important. So I really want to empower other immigrants and let them know that they shouldn't be scared to take the census, because it's actually really going to benefit them.
So what you've said, some of it is questionable by some people, and I'll follow up on that. We've been looking at this slide now for some time, and the one thing it says is April 1st, and many people think of April 1st in terms of April Fool's Day. So is this a joke?
Absolutely not.
No.
No. Unfortunately, the date we have for the National Census Day is April 1st. That is the reference point for the census that happens every 10 years.
And who selects that day?
I imagine the Census Bureau at the federal level.
Oh, it's it's kind of interesting that they would select April 1st.
We find a lot of things interesting.
If they're really taking this very seriously, right?
You know, we find a lot of things that have occurred recently very of interest and not a joke. You know, whether that was the testing, whether it was the testing of the census question, the questionnaire, to some extent it created chaos, confusion, when we know that it's going to be a challenge already. And so as the county is moving forward, along in the state, that's been our main points of question to the feds is, why are we putting out misinformation? We're trying so hard to educate and really best inform our community residents. And this, whether it's the citizenship question, whether it's the test, whether it's we're adding, we're possibly going to add one thing or remove it. We're going to remove the census. We're going to postpone it. Those are just crazy chaos.
So what kind of responses is the county getting to those questions about the misinformation?
Well, we don't get direct responses. We get it funnels through from the feds to the state, and then the state through our delegates, and then to the delegates.
So do you think this might be part of the administration's policies to kind of cause this confusion, to disseminate confusion?
I mean, that's a good question. I can see why you would ask that, but I can't say for sure, what is going on, whether it's just confusion in the Bureau itself or whether it's something intentional. We don't know.
So how much independence does the county have? For example, with that pre-survey, did the county have to send it out? Was it sent out by the county?
No.
Oh.
We have no independence whatsoever. I mean, everything is coming from the Federal Census Bureau. There's nothing within our control whatsoever.
So you have to, I guess, take directions and send out the survey.
No, actually, it's entirely a federal operation. So everything related to census taking, so the field operations, the enumeration, the actual questionnaire, that is all a federal operation that we have no control over. We can ask questions, we can provide our feedback, but at the end of the day, it's theirs. What we do at the county is really to make sure residents are educated, they understand the value, and then they understand that if they need help completing the census, where to go so that they're able to participate. So that's really what our role is, about that education and support, but not at all about the actual counting of people. That does not fall to us at all.
And in terms of the promotional material, I know, Megan, you said the county wanted to put its own stamp on some of the material. You can do that.
We can, and that's our office working directly with our residents. And so we want to make sure that our message is supporting them. And so we're tailoring our messages to our communities. The federal government has created materials, but they may not speak to our residents. So we wanted to make sure to do that.
So it does seem that there is some leeway. Are there other things the county can do to individualize its participation with residents in terms of the census?
We individualize it based on our community members. What we would do with one community may be very different than what we would do with the coastal farm worker farm worker community. So we tailor our message to the community and in the language and with that community. So Megan is actually able to break it down into block groups, very specific on what language is spoken in very specific areas, down to street level. So our message will be very tailored to that community in the language most spoken.
Now, the federal government cannot step in, can it, and say, no, that's going too far?
No, absolutely not.
No. So the county does have that freedom.
Correct.
So we have some more promotional material that the county is putting out that we can look at. Now, this is what you need to know. Tell us about that. What is it that residents need to know?
Well, I think the very first point is really that everyone, regardless of age, immigration status, citizenship status, or criminal history really should be counted. And for the reasons we've talked about, whether it's funding for critical community programs or making sure that every community has a voice in our political system, we really want to make sure everyone understands this is not like voting, right? Every single person, whether you're just born or whether you're 90 years old, we need to make sure that they're counted, and that's kind of the #1 message that we want to get across.
So Melissa, that reminds me, you had said that as an immigrant, you feel that you're entitled to various social services.
Yeah.
There are those who would say, no, you're not.
Well, I would say I'm a valuable member of this community. I live here, I work here, I pay taxes. And the census really is just counting people who live at a particular location by April 1st, 2020. And that's all they need to know. So, but
So
for
if
me,
you, yes, go on, I'm sorry.
But for me, we get those federal funds from the government, but that includes things like the education and Head Start programs, school lunch programs. So it'll help the community. Because when everybody is helped and everybody's lifted, the community as a whole is lifted. And I truly believe that. So the more that immigrants have access to services, regardless of who thinks they deserve or don't deserve them, it's going to benefit, I think, society and the community as a whole. So
I assume you're all in agreement with that?
Yeah, and I think it's also important to know that some of the services we're talking about is access to transportation, to roads, to school lunch programs. I mean, there's a wealth of information that people don't know. I mean, if I wasn't counted, this high school wouldn't be here. This library is not here. We won't, without being counted, they can't make plans on where to build the next park in your community. So that's how critical it is. And I don't think that there's a disconnect at times.
Well, there is a disconnect in the fact that the administration seems to be doing everything it can to crack down and make it difficult for immigrants in terms of getting social services and having access to school lunch programs and health care. And at the same time, there's a census coming out saying, well, we want to, have you counted so that we can provide these services for everybody in the county. So what can be said in terms of what seems like a disconnect?
I think one thing from my perspective is that the administration isn't the government, whether it's the government at the federal, state, or local levels, right? The administration is the current administration. That's all it is, in my perspective. Whereas I think we have a lot of agencies within the federal government. We have a whole state government as well as our local county government that very much believes that people need to be counted so that we can provide enough resources to meet folks' needs.
Definitely agree with that. I think the other thing is the county is working very strongly with our partners. We have 770,000 residents in our county who need access to multiple services, whether direct access, whether it's to their neighbor, directly to them, or to a family member. And I think it's let's start with healthcare. Healthcare is critical to our community, to our network, to our residents. And so partnering up with the health department, partnering up with our legal aid society and other legal providers to really take away that bad information, I would say misguided information. So that's where Immigrant Services in our county under the Office of Community Affairs, we also work with our legal aid providers to help disseminate and really provide that most accurate information to, again, encourage people to complete and participate in the census.
I would be remiss if I did not, Aparna, comment on your statement that the administration right now is this administration. It does, however, represent, what does it represent? The whole country. And it's trying to change laws for the whole country.
But I believe that one way that we can raise our voices and take that power back is through the census, really, because it's us saying, we're here, and here's what we want, right? We lose the ability to have that voice when we don't get counted. because it changes our ability to have representation. So this is all a part of a process.
So one can understand why it's so important for those on the other side to keep those voices quiet. If you're saying we're taking our power back, then one can see why they'd like to consolidate that power so that it's not taken back.
Yeah, but I don't think it's a zero-sum game, because at the end of the day, the count is important. It's important that it's accurate for everybody, because that's what we use for planning, for policy, for budgeting. And so if those numbers are wrong, and the census data is the official national statistics, and they count for 10 years. So if we have bad data, that means we're going to make bad decisions for 10 years down the road. And none of us can afford to do that, regardless of what side you're on.
So what it means is that there is a risk of making bad decisions that some people might think are bad and other people might think are good, depending on whatever side you are on, right?
They're not informed decisions. They're because you're not having a true representation of how many folks are living here. Therefore, the data that they are using to make those policy and program decisions will not be well informed. And that's a difference between a bad decision. It's just they're lacking the information that they need to know.
Well, I think the discussion we're having right now goes right to the heart of some of the controversy around the census. Do you think?
For the first time, I think, as we talked about the controversy, but as well as it's going to an online version. And early statistics already show that it's about a 58% expected response rate. That's billions of dollars lost to our state. And California being one of the it is considered the hardest state that's undercounted. In addition to that, for the first time in history, we're at risk with a low response rate, we're at risk of losing a congressional seat.
So it seems to me it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face to have an online survey that is almost predicted to be only 58% accurate. It's like, what sense does that make?
We're still hopeful that we're going to get a 100% response rate. And that's why we're working very strongly. We have an entire team working on this.
And that's not misplaced hope, misplaced optimism.
Well, in 2010, we had a 75% response rate, and we are hopeful, and that's our goal, and then we stand behind that goal.
Okay.
And we're committed to those resources.
Now, what do you know about the 25% of the people who weren't counted?
It's actually not that they weren't counted, it's that they didn't respond on their own, right? So what we really want to do is make sure people respond on their own, whether they want to do that online, by the phone, or by mail. There's still all those options. So it is primarily online, but people will have different options. And our goal is to really allow people to respond in the way that they prefer, kind of in the comfort of their own home and their own time, so that they don't have enumerators following up, coming to their homes to ask them those questions. Because the goal of the Bureau and for us is to have as close to 100% participation rate as possible, because that's what we are, asked to do, is to actually count everybody.
And so it seems to me, if immigrants are already afraid that ICE might be knocking at their door, having census enumerators knocking at their door might also generate suspicions and fears.
Absolutely, and that's why we're really promoting and encouraging people to fill out their censuses before that would occur. So if you turn it in, and one of the good things about it being online is that we will know immediately where areas have actually filled out their surveys. And so we can deploy people into the field if we know a certain area of a city or a community has not been responding, and work with the residents to find out why that is and offer assistance and support. And if folks fill out their surveys, then they will not have anyone knock on their door.
And I wonder how many times these enumerators are going to knock on the same door if they don't get an answer. Are there any guidelines?
Is it 3 times? I believe it's 3 times.
Oh, okay. We have more promotional information that we can show that the county is sending out. So we saw, so what is this? Tell us about this photo.
This is happy to announce that is our complete count committee. That is really our reflection of all our partners, organizations, business representatives. So in there you'll see Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Kaiser, and there's a wealth of Boys and Girls Club, And everyone really, this is the power of partnership coming together, because it counts. Everybody wants to be counted. And this is how important it is, because it impacts whether it's our Boys and Girls Club, whether it's our healthcare, access to healthcare, Human Service Agency, Thrive Alliance, who works with the nonprofits of our organization, Project We Hope in East Palo Alto is on our Complete Count Committee. The cities, we have every city manager and mayors that are participating in our Complete Count Committee, and as well in our steering committee.
How many people on the
So that
Complete
picture
Count.
right there, it doesn't have all our members, but we have over 50 members now that participate in our Complete Count Committee
and how often does the committee meet?
once a month.
And you are what, how are you connected with that again? The co-chair or
We
the
are
chair?
the co-chair with Thrive Alliance, as well as SAMCETA.
And SAMCETA is the San Mateo.
Economic Development Association.
Thank you.
Thank you. And so we co-chair the community Complete Count Committee, and actually today we met. And so we had a room full. We had even CZI was on it. It's really
And that's the Chan Zuckerberg.
and Grow
initiative.
Foundation, correct. I mean, really, it's the best return on our investment,
Is
but
this
it's critical for everybody.
Is this a decision-making body?
Our steering committee is a decision-making body, but this body does provide guidance and support and educates us and gives us suggestions. We work around the table to say, have a discussion, look at gap analysis, and really provide guidance on which we should do. Where do we deploy resources?
So you met today. Can you give us one idea that came out of today's meeting in terms of where resources should be applied, or what should be done going forward?
Sure. One of the resources that we talked about is we will now be implementing or launching a text tool app. And the text tool app is really a pledging. And what's a text tool where people can pledge to be counted. And really it motivates our community to be involved. They can get additional information and stay well informed of census, whether it's through texting or through an email.
So usually when there are pledges, I don't know, there's money that follows pledges, but then there might be gifts that go back to those who sign up. So are there any exchanges like that going on?
No,
No.
we did struggle with that word. However, that is what is being adopted statewide and federally. You're just pledging your support, that you will fill out the survey, and you will also tell your friends, your community, your coworkers about the importance of the census.
So that pledging of support, is that counted someplace?
It will be.
Absolutely.
Ah,
Yes.
is that an online survey? How do people pledge their support?
So we will have a number, a phone number, and a word that you will text, and then it'll prompt you through a series of questions where you can either enter your email address or keep it on text-based. And so we will have all that information on all of our materials passed around. It'll be on our website.
So some might say that's additional information collected.
All we're collecting is either an email or a phone number and your zip code.
Oh, those
That's
are the
all
questions.
we
Those are
wanted.
the totality of the questions.
That's correct. So therefore, if we are doing an outreach event in Daly City, we'll have the zip codes and we can text folks saying, look, we're going to be out here.
So I am wondering, using that data, will you then compare it to the actual online surveys or online responses that might come in? So
No.
there's not going to be any correlation.
And as soon as it's over, we will discard.
Yes.
Everything will
Oh,
be
you're
destroyed.
not going to use that as
we
an
will not
email
be
list.
using
for-
No. So
Definitely
one-time use, as well as at any time, we've also allowed that people could exit out at any time.
Yeah.
We've given those that have subscribed and pledged to be counted and pledged to be involved, they could exit out from this text tool app that we will have available.
Oh, okay. It's
At any
not
time.
there. It's not there yet. Okay, I think we have maybe another photo or graphic to show. We showed that one. And everyone counts. This young man who seems very enthusiastic.
We had an event at the San Mateo County, and it was Bring Your Child to Work Day. And so there was a great meeting about what departments do, and so then we had a little informational session about the census, and then spoke to the children, and that was one of our employees' children.
Okay. We also have a promotional video that was, it's my understanding, that was just uploaded. So I'll see if we can pull that up. And while they're searching for it, just in case it's not available, which it should be, Megan, can you tell us who's involved? Oh, here we go, I think. As a journalist, I do everything I can to refrain from giving my opinion when I'm covering stories. But Census 2020 is much too important for me to be quiet, because Census 2020 affects all of us. Did you know that when we send money to the federal government, the government gives back nearly $1,000 per person? This is a lot of money, and the less people who are counted, the less money will be received. East Palo Alto cannot afford to lose that money. The census is important for you, your family, and your community. Make sure your voice is heard, because everyone counts.
That was great.
That's wonderful.
Well, as I said, I, as a journalist, try not to get involved in taking a position on issues to maintain objectivity. Who were some of the others? I was expecting some other people. There are about, what, 5 people?
We had 6 people in total. We had a member of our Veterans Commission who's a veteran. We have someone from our Multicultural Institute, day laborer. We had someone from our Youth Council Commission, someone from our Ambassador Program who is a recent immigrant, and someone from our medical community, a pediatrician.
And where will that video play? I understand it's right now on YouTube?
We have, every 3 weeks we'll be posting a new video to try to spread them out, and right now we have one on our website, and it's also on our YouTube channel.
You're saying that was mine. That was so
Yours is now up. We started with Ben from the Veterans Commission.
Oh, okay. And how long will these run?
Yeah, they'll be running for every 3 weeks, and we hope to run them all the way through Census Day. And we have more videos to come as well. We're actually working on a film now that really shows the solidarity of our county employees and what it means to them and why census is important to county employees.
Solidarity?
Yes.
Yeah, solidarity. That this is not just a Office of Community Affairs. This is really San Mateo County coming together, all 25 departments coming together because census is important to everyone. And counting, making sure that everyone is counted, is critical to our organization and critical to our community and to our residents for lifelong, as Aparna said, for the next 10 years and 20 years to come. The counting that happens today will impact for the next 10 years.
So there has been a lot of stress in terms of community organizations enlisting their support. What's being done in that regard?
So we recently closed our request for proposals, and we will be pushing out funds up to $1 million, and so we'll be working with many organizations throughout the county. We split the county into 8 regions to focus on demographics and geographies, and so those will be the organizations that will work on the ground as trusted messengers for grassroots outreach.
Those who applied.
Those who applied and were awarded, which we'll announce very soon, but then we'll have a second round of funding coming out as well, which will be mini contracts, so much smaller organizations can apply for those. We're looking for innovative ideas, technology, high school civics groups, all types of individuals or organizations can apply for those.
So I think you said $3 million?
We are putting together $3 million that will go out to our community, to San Mateo County directly. So 1.5 will be directly to, I would say, grassroots organizations. So the additional, Megan just said we just closed, or we'll be announcing our awardees that applied for the $1 million. And then an additional mini contracts will go out, and really grassroots. I think those are the trusted messengers. So it's critical that it gets to our faith-based, our Boys and Girls Club, our libraries, the Rotary clubs. I mean, those are the trusted messengers. They're not going to trust Emma Gonzalez, who works for San Mateo County. That's just it. They will trust Henrietta.
Oh, I don't know.
They will trust. That's who they'll trust. No, that is actually, we have research to show that it's that personal, relational approach that's going to count. It's having that one-on-one conversation as we're sitting around this table, having a conversation of how it's important. Many people don't realize that it happens every 10 years. don't really connect to, well, if I'm not counted, I wouldn't have this school. I wouldn't have access to this school. So we really have to bridge that gap and make it, why is it important, and really break it down to how it impacts the individual, their families, because people don't understand that. And understandably, it's a very complicated system. It's a very complicated way to understand it. $676 billion are dispersed through the census.
So do you know, I think the first question many will ask is, with all of the millions and billions that's going to be distributed and circulated, what's the accountability? For example, you've talked about 3 million or 1.5 million being distributed now in grants.
Right.
What's the follow-up? Is there a follow-up? Seeing, finding out, keeping track of how the money is being used and where it's going?
Absolutely, and so we'll be working with all the grantees for both rounds to make sure that they're trained, so they understand how to speak about census, how to do community outreach. Now, many of them are experts more than we are, but we just want to make sure that they have everything they need to be able to speak confidently and comfortably about census and be able to really make that connection using a relational approach, so they can, kind of speak to people in terms of their priorities and their needs. And then we're also going to be asking them to monitor their outreach, so we can understand how many people are being reached, how are they reaching them, what's working, what's not. And the pledge that we talked about is part of that tracking for us, because we don't have the actual end, I completed it, but what we can do is say that all these organizations that were funded by us, that partnered with us, reached 700, hopefully, and 70,000 people, right, across our county, and that they were able to get, hopefully, almost all of them to pledge to take that census.
So sometimes, and I shouldn't say sometimes, once money is dispersed, there is some accountability at the end of it. How did you use it? Where did it go? Is any left over? Give it back. Is anything like that built into the system?
Definitely, it is. There is accountability at all ends. We have metrics that we'll be evaluating. We hold metrics on what is expected to be completed as well. At the end, we also will build in an evaluation. How effective was our approach? What the approach was in 2010 is far different than the approach we're using now. And it's a multi-pronged approach. I think we have to look at what worked, what didn't, what can we learn from, and how can we improve it. Who knows what 2030 is going to come?
Yes, and the thing about it is there might be different technology, there might be different people there, and it might be an altogether different ballgame.
Absolutely.
Well, social media is a different approach.
Yes. So I'm thinking, when you sit and you do that analysis, can it be applied to something else?
We hope so. We hope so, because this is basically civic engagement, right? It's community organizing, it's collaboration and coordination, and these are things that we have to do all the time on variety of topics, right? Whether it's healthcare, whether it's anything else. And so this is an opportunity to engage people around the census and really get them to take part in our civic society. But it's also an opportunity to build capacity, to build relationships. So these 50 people that are on our Complete Count Committee have hopefully strengthened their relationships with each other as well, and their experience in collaborating together. And so that's a big win in the long run for everyone.
Well, it sounds impressive. It sounds optimistic. It sounds a little idealistic, no?
Well, I think it's, as Aparna said, there's a lot of opportunity here, and we've seen those opportunities already shape. As you talked about earlier, there are a lot of different political or decisions, policy decisions that are taking place, public charge being one.
Now talk about public charge.
Well, public charge is also a decision that will impact different communities, many of which are hard to count communities. So in providing, again, we're working with the same partners. We've been able to, through the census, is also expand that partnership, build it, and really get down.
So in talking about public charge, saying a little bit more, there is an attempt going on by the administration to deny immigrant status or citizenship to anybody who might need social services.
Yes. there hasn't been a decision, and we are
Has or
working.
has not been?
Yes,
An
there was
executive order.
there was a decision made that will take in place on October 15th. And the details of that, well, again, it's a complicated thing. Legal department, we have a lot of our legal department, our county council, as well as our legal providers are really going through in detail to say how it's going to most impact. But we do have Department of Housing, Health Services, Human Services, County Manager's Office, Office of Community Affairs, Immigrant Services, all working very closely together to really partner up and get the most accurate information to our community residents that are most at risk.
Now, I know this is the subject of another lawsuit that's working its way through the courts to put off that October 15th ruling. Now, going back, Melissa, to the services that you said people are entitled to and why they should be counted, that seems that executive orders or initiatives like that kind of put more fear into people where they would not sign up for those services and they would be reluctant to fill out anything else that's asking information from them.
That's true. And I think part of our job working in community affairs is to really let people know in the community that San Mateo County is inclusive and supportive, and that we really want to empower our immigrant community, and we are there to assist them and help them, and that we're on their side.
Now, the county might be on its side, on their side, but the county is up against the federal government. So it seems it's an uphill battle, is it? An uphill battle to instill trust, an uphill battle to get cooperation, collaboration.
I think it's a challenge, but what we're finding is that the organizations that we're working with, they understand what's at stake, and so they're willing to take that role as those trusted messengers to make sure that people are informed and they're making an informed decision about whether to participate or not. So they get the facts, right? Because there's a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation. So it's important that they hear from the people they rely on for that type of information, and they're assured about the census itself, why it's important, why it's safe to complete. And so we're definitely facing challenges, but I am a little hopeful and idealistic perhaps that if they hear it from many people, so if they hear it from our office, they hear it from their service provider, they hear it from their schools, they hear it from their elected officials, that they're hearing it from multiple people that they trust and know have their best interests at heart, that they're going to consider it and hopefully have enough information to make an informed decision about what to do.
Now, you said something, you said that they will get the facts in terms of the census. And that's the title of this show, the census, the facts. Census 2020, the facts. Any other facts, ideas you'd like to share in the time that's remaining? Something that we've talked about that you'd like to expound upon, or something that we haven't touched on?
Well, personally, I like to think that the census only takes 10 minutes to complete, and there's only 10 questions. But
One question a minute, or 1 minute per
But
question.
it only takes 10 minutes, there's 10 questions, but it affects the next 10 years. So if you just think 10, 10, 10, it really doesn't take that much time to complete, but just in the long run, it can have far-reaching consequences if people don't participate. So.
Okay.
And I think that 10 questions is really important because the Census Bureau has ongoing surveys that they put out that are really long and ask a lot of detailed information, but this is not that. This decennial census has those only 10 questions, and they're really basic questions, as I mentioned before. Name, age, gender, date of birth, and race, ethnicity. Those are pretty basic information, and it, to Melissa's point, doesn't take long to fill that out because hopefully we know that very quickly.
Now, you mentioned that the idea that the Census Bureau puts out a lot of surveys and information, and what's going to distinguish the Census 2020 survey from the other surveys that the Census Bureau puts out?
So the Census Bureau also puts out the American Community Survey, which is a representative sampling of the United States. So it only goes to a smaller proportion of the United States residents, and it asks very detailed information about how much income you earn, what's your level of education, everything. There's about 50 questions, I believe.
And when is that sent out?
That happens every year. But it's, again, a much smaller sampling of the United States.
And will it be sent out around the time the
No.
No.
So the decennial is every 10, and then in between that, the American Survey has more detailed information.
Okay, after Census 2020 is sent out next year,
That's
when
correct.
that'll be. So
2021.
let's get the dates straight. We saw April 1st. Is that the kickoff?
April 1st is considered Census Day.
Okay.
And then you'll have a few months to fill out your surveys. I believe it's till the end of June.
A few
July.
months? That's a long time
Well,
for just 10 questions.
They're going to be sending you several postcards if you forget to fill it out. And also don't forget it's during the primary election. So there's a lot of information being pushed out to people as far as flyers and postcards. And so that's why there's several opportunities to fill out your survey.
And I'm thinking with all the information going out to people, that can be kind of confusing too.
Absolutely.
Which is why we're starting now. We want to make sure that everyone knows that in late March they're going to get something in the mail to invite them to participate, and that they don't lose it in the clutter, that they are looking for it, they know what it is, and they know what they need to do. That's really the goal of starting early, is so that there isn't confusion, when we really need them to fill it out.
And the deadline, October, when is all of this to be completed?
Oh, wow.
I think it's, when we find the results, or?
When the cutoff,
The cutoff.
for the survey the census is over.
So in April and May, they allow folks to self-respond through the 3 methods that we talked about: online, phone, and mail. If you haven't responded by May, they're going to start sending out these enumerators, these census workers, to knock on doors and gather the information. They will probably work through July, August.
July.
Yeah. But the actual presentation of the results is in December.
So we should know by December 2020 who our next elected officials are.
That is true.
Wow.
And
Yes.
also the feedback from the census. So 2020 is really a very important year.
It's a critical year.
It's critical.
It's a critical year.
Well, it all seems to be very, very critical, especially the census. And I certainly think that you've offered a lot of important information on it, including what we went out for, and that's to get the facts. So I'd like to thank you, the 4 of you, for being here on the show and giving us the type of information that we need. And with 30 seconds left, who wants to have the last word?
Well, thank you very much for inviting us. Let me start off by thanking you to invite us, and thank you for being on the show to really talk about the facts of census and how critical it is, and how we encourage and invite everyone to be counted in Census 2020, because we all have a voice and we all should be heard regardless of your citizenship.
Well, I think you've had the last word on this. And I'd like to thank the 4 of you for being with me to talk about Census 2020. And I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time.